here for the Decriminalizing Our Youth a webinar with Donna Hylton. You're in the right place. Just a few housekeeping items. If you are looking for the captioning, please go to the live transcript and turn on your closed captioning. For any questions, please use the box for the Q&A. If you're having any technical issues, please use the chat box. We will paste these instructions in the chat box too. I now will just give it to Chris to welcome Donna Hylton and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Sana, for all your support, and welcome everyone to our second webinar that featuring Donna Hylton, who had been scheduled as our keynote speaker for our 2020 Transformative Justice Conference, Ending Violence Without Violence. It is such an honor to welcome Donna back today for this specific workshop, but let me read first a little bit about who Donna is in case you weren't with us yesterday and didn't get a chance to see more about her. Donna Hylton is an activist and an author who advocates for the rights and the well-being of women and girls who have been impacted by intersectional trauma such as sexual abuse and assault, domestic violence, police brutality, and incarceration. She is an outspoken proponent of the need to incorporate harm reduction into our policies for addressing societal and justice issues within a humane framework. Ms. Hylton's advocacy includes contributing to legislation that seeks to reverse injustice and improve the lives of impacted people, such as the landmark Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, the New York State Less is More bill, and the Close Rikers campaign. A leading voice in the bail reform movement, Donna also sits on the Brooklyn Bail Fund Board of Directors, and she's also a member of the advisory board for Sankofa, the progressive organization founded by actor and activist Harry Belafonte. Without further ado, let me introduce Donna Hylton.
Hi, everyone. Good. Is it good afternoon for everyone? Good morning. So I was wondering, are we able to show the film again today to this audience? No? Is that not possible?
I don't think
Okay.
it is. Sorry.
Okay. I wasn't clear about that. I thought we were, because I was hoping that they could get a better understanding. And I believe that this audience are those who sexual assault, like counseling. Am I correct? Advocates? I just want to make sure I'm clear of the audience I'm speaking with.
Sure. Well, we can ask folks to put in the chat where they're coming from, but we have a mix of advocates and counselors in both of the webinars we did. So there is some overlap. There are people here today who were here yesterday. So that's kind of, and we don't have the video like zoomed up or queued up at all.
Okay.
But
I see somebody popped in, probation officer here. I said,
yeah, okay. I would say that if people are not with victim services of any kind, please put in the chat where you're from. That would give you an idea of the diversity of the audience, I think. And
yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, it's nice to know. So hi everyone again. I'm never a person that likes to talk at or, people. I always want to engage people. I want to know, obviously I know why you're here because you're in this work. And when we're talking about sexual assault, sexual abuse, ending violence. So I understand that clearly, but I also like to get a feel of why people are even doing this work. What brings you into this work, doing this? Is it a personal relationship with the work, right? And that could mean a host of things. Is it that, you're looking at it in an altruistic manner in which, you want to help someone, right? Or is it, let's be honest and transparent, or is it because it's just a job? And and it's something to do, and why not? Because there's something about it that you like. I mean, we have to be clear with that as well. And I pose this because from my own experience and the experience of the hundreds and hundreds of mainly women and girls that I've served time with in Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, and also gotten to know in this space, doing this work, this advocacy work, that we have reached out to those, or looked to those that hold certain roles and spaces in this work for help and support. And oftentimes it has not worked out in our favor. You know, my story, I'll go into my story a little bit now. I was born on the island of Jamaica, and at the age of seven and a half, I found out I was trafficked. I was brought to this country by a couple, for whatever purposes. I was told I was coming to this country to go to Disneyland, and you know, I thought I was gonna just have fun. I was a little girl. I didn't understand much of anything. You know, I was a child. I was taken from my mother, the island that I knew. I come from Jamaica. The family that I knew, the friends that I had, and the environment that I was accustomed to. And I was brought here 2 years later. I was 9.5. I was still waiting to go to Disneyland, and also to see my mother again. I never saw my mother again. And I was a child and didn't know what was going on. But what happened at that age, at 9.5, I started being taken to a closet and being raped and abused, sexually abused, by a man that I was now told to call dad. And of course, being a child, I didn't have any control over anything. I didn't know what to do. I knew that the behavior was wrong. I knew something was wrong about it, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to ask for help. You know, I immediately thought and or felt or owned it. It was a heavy thing, right? That what was going on, because I was constantly being told, I don't tell. If you tell anyone, you're going to get in trouble. It's your fault. You know, I'm the only one that's going to love you. And, you know, all these things in my head as a child. And I didn't know. So I started like, all this is going on. It's my fault. If I do anything, if I say anything, it's going to be bad. I can't say anything. I have to hold all of this. And I didn't even know what I was holding, right, as a child. And it just continued. It like happened for years. And finally, well, I went to school at the age of 12, and something clicked me one day, like, oh, wow, I can go tell the school counselor. And they always tell you that if there's a problem, if you need help, that you can tell your school counselor no matter what it is. And back in those days, we used to have a little sex education class and all that other stuff. So it's borderline there, right? And I did. I went to tell the counselor. I was 12. And in that conversation, me opening up and letting her know that I was tired of being hurt, tired of being taken into the closet by my father, she called my adoptive mother. And whatever they were talking about, it didn't round up good for me. I became the liar. I was threatened that I was going to be sent away. I mean, so many things. It just, so it was a lot more to own. And so I didn't tell again. And it became worse. I was a very gifted child. I did well in school, but I had no personal skills. I had no social skills. I didn't know how to be with other children, other people outside of a school environment, because I wasn't allowed to be. Because I was always locked in the house if I wasn't at school. I didn't have keys so I can go out and play. I couldn't have kids come over and play. I couldn't go to their house. I couldn't even call them on the phone. Everything was school and whatever they told me to do or wanted me to do. And also the sexual abuse by my now father. My escape, when it started, was when you take me into the closet, was a light that was coming under their door. It was the window outside. It was their bedroom walk-in closet. And the light that was coming under the door, I would escape in that light. It was that light that kept me, that child, safe. I felt protected in the light. I would be removed from the pain and the stuff that was going on in that closet. And so it would be that light throughout my childhood and my adolescence and my young adulthood, all the way up into getting involved, getting involved in a crime that I had no control over, that I would hold on to try to just to survive. But I must say this, every adult figure that I came across that I thought, was supposed to represent a system that helped you, I still tried to get some help. Period. I would still try. I went to police officer. I was kidnapped and assaulted by an older man who wanted me to be his girlfriend. I had gotten away from my daughter's father, who was an abuser, and my daughter's a product of rape. I'll get back to that. But that police detective wound up sexually assaulting me after taking me to the hospital from being harmed. And so, it becomes difficult to trust. At the age of 14, I finally ran away, but I was running away with an older person, an older man, 10 years my senior, because there was the only adult that was listening, that, knew something was going on and said he would help me and make sure no one would hurt me. I didn't know he had ulterior motives. Your child, you want to get away. I needed help. And so I ran away with him. He became like my worst nightmare. At 15, I got pregnant. My daughter's a product of rape. And I had to navigate that on my own. So I was a child with a child and trying to figure it out. And I'm not making excuses for, what led to my incarceration, but I have to say it played a big part because I didn't know how to navigate and process things well, and I never had that good adult supervision or support and that nurturing. The choices that I would make were not well developed and nurtured choices, and so one of them was saying, okay, I would say I witnessed an intimate scene between two people. One of them I absolutely didn't know. One I worked with because I was working temporary jobs, trying to model, trying to figure it out, and I walked into a kidnapping and could never walk back out. I also became a victim, but Mr. V, who was the victim who was kidnapped, died, and I owned all that. I thought all that was my fault. I was still young. I was an adolescent and a system, so I could have a drink. Of course, you're old enough to have a drink in this country, but not old enough for much anything else. But I owned all of that. I thought it was all my fault. And still, no one asked me, going through the process, court process, judicial process, that piece. No one bothered to find out when they were doing the pre-sentence report, which they find out, I think most of if we have a probation officer here, what a pre-sentence report is, they ask you questions about your life, So I remember being asked a question by the probation officer, and when I said that I was brought to this country and I started being, I told him truth. I started being molested by my father now, his father figure, at 9.5. Never questioned it, said I alleged. Then I said I had a daughter, I was pregnant at 15, had her at 16, alleges. I had run away, alleges running away. When I gave as much as I could about myself, everything was alleged, but no one even ever questioned it. No one said, well, maybe we should get her some, let her see a psychologist, anybody, any therapy, anything, so we can probably assess her and see what happened here, right? So one of the things I learned in that process was that the system, the judicial process itself, They don't really care about any of us, not the victims of crime, not those that perpetrated, nothing. I didn't get that from them. And that's one of the things I vowed to like expose and to share with people, because we continue to victimize people, we continue to silence people, we continue to overlook the seriousness of their trauma and their pain, and how oftentimes harmed people can cause harm because no one addresses it. No one looks at the root causes. No one sees the whole person. No one wants to talk to the child. No one wants to listen to children. No one wants to listen to little girls. No one wants to listen to Black children. Let's be clear. And we need to do better. The only way to end violence without violence is to listen and to understand that their root causes, people come from somewhere. People have a background. They have a story. Everyone is a story. We're all a walking book. And we need to know what the story is, and so we can know who the person is. And we need to listen, really listen to children. Really listen to children. They can tell us a lot. They tell us a lot if we just listen to them. So I hope I shared enough of the story right now to engage those of you to ask questions, because I don't want to talk to people or at people. I like to have conversations. I like to converse with people. And so I would love to hear if anyone has questions based on what I've said, any thoughts that come into your mind, in this work. Yeah.
Donna, my camera just decided to quit working, but I think you can hear me. And
Yeah.
so I will, I'll pull some things out of the chat if there are questions in there. Although we did encourage folks to use the Q&A box, I don't see any questions in the Q&A box. So I'm just going to check the chat. And other NISCASA team members, if you feel like you've seen something and you want to pipe up, that's totally fine. I don't have to be the only speaker from NISCASA. So there's a lot of folks that identified their different roles. And I'm going to start at the top here.
I see someone said they've been working in victim service. They have previous work in victim services and loved it so much they decided to come back. Yeah.
Yep. And we have somebody here who oversees detentions at a New York State Office for Children and Family Services. And this person, Daisy, oversees detentions to ensure services are being provided. We have a social worker from New Jersey, a sexual violence prevention advocate from Central Vermont.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for questions, but I want you to know the audience. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's important for me to tell the audience that what I didn't say to you was my now adoptive mother was a psychiatric social worker when I was brought to this country. She then later became one of the directors in New York State's mental health program. So as a little girl, she would oftentimes take me to Randall's Island. That was back then when I think Creedmoor was around, not remembering all the rest, but she would take me. And taking a little girl to these places was traumatizing. It was really, but it's brought me to work. I actually would enjoy it because I would get away from the father that was taking me to a closet or just raping me in their bedroom. So abuse isn't isolated to those that don't have the so-called good upbringing, or that kind of living in a neighborhood that you have middle class working families or the like. It's not isolated to those that come from, unfortunately, underserved populations, communities, marginalized communities. There's not, this abuse and violence and trauma is not isolated to those communities and to those people. It happens all over, and that's one of the things that was used against me when I went to court was like, oh, she's so smart. how could she, you know, she should have known better. Being book smart has nothing to do with having any kind of social skills and knowing how to be around people, especially when trauma on top of trauma and top of trauma and top of trauma has become the fabric, basically, of the person, right? And if you don't have any adult intervention for children to help, because children can't, you can't help yourself as a child. You need that help. And that's why we're here, right? That's why we're here, those of us doing this work, to listen and know and to acknowledge and to really be honest and understanding to whomever might be saying, hey, I'm in pain. I'm tired of being hurt, or I was hurt and I don't know how to deal with it. I need help. You know, one of the things I see, I spent 27 years based on, being convicted of the crimes of kidnapping and murder. And I was sentenced to 25 years to life. And I served 27 years in New York State's maximum security prison for women. And when I went in there, I met so many women that have very similar stories, very similar experiences. And a lot of them were there because of it, really, because of the trauma and the violence that they were subjected to. And that has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It just has to do with the reasons why, or who's really in our prison system and who has not received any help. And so I bring those things out, but I do this work based on that. And one of the themes that we all had in common was no one listened to us. No one helped us, or they didn't know where to go for help, or couldn't go for help because you're not taught to really go for help because you're so buried deep in the trauma that you take on this blame, you take on everything that it brings, and you can't think straight. And so, when they were saying, oh, well, she's so smart and, she didn't know better. I was a kid. I went to the school counselor. I went to a police officer. I was a pastor also that, raped me as well. I mean, where else do you go? Where else do you go from there? How do you trust? How do you move past that? How do you not be stuck? How do you become unstuck? How do you develop? How do you tell people, who, and show people who you really are if you're never given an opportunity? So I just really want to make that clear to this audience that, my mother was worked next door to the governor's office when the World Trade Centers, were still here. She went on, to being a director of our New York State mental health program, one of them. And so what do you do with that? If you can't get the help from those that right there call themselves family or, those figures, what do you do? And that's why I'm asking the question to all of you, why are you here? Why are you doing the work? Because there's stories like mine. Everyone's not going to, come from the same kind of environment and face with the same things. And it's so important to just really believe children, believe people when they tell you they've been hurt. And not be so quick to judge and punish and stuff, because they need help. They need support. Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. We've got a lot of folks identifying as folks who work with youth and want to be the person that makes a difference for young people. And we also have some folks who are not, who are white, who want to better understand the lives of children of color and adults of color and the types of, just be more empathic and more effective in advocating. And we also have people, we've got a lot of different folks, but a lot are doing prevention work and really trying to work directly with youth. And we do have several questions, so I think it might be good to start asking you these now that they're coming in. Deborah Faust asks, Deborah Faust, who also mentioned that she has lived experience with trauma, and she actually is my project partner on the Building Connections Sexual Assault Mental Health Project. She asks you, how did you cope with all of the grief associated with the losses?
You know, I think a similar question yesterday. I can just tell you that, you know, one thing that people ask me is, how did you survive prison, right? Prison is just as traumatic as any other trauma that you receive. I mean, prison is a very violent, abnormal place. Um, and I survived all of that by knowing that there was more to life. There was more to what was going on and what's happened to me and happened around me than what happened. That there was more to me. I was never allowed to like be myself, to grow into who I could truly be. And it unfortunately took until I got to prison for it to happen. I should never have happened. And what I did was hold on to that light. When I said that light that was under the door, and I held on to that light. So I was always searching. I was like, I knew stuff would be better. I knew it wasn't right. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't change it. I couldn't do anything about it. But what I did was own it all. But I kept fighting against it. Like, no, something's wrong here. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was wrong. Something was wrong. I didn't know how to make it right until one day when I was in prison. I was like, I have to face myself. I had to face myself, look at myself. And facing myself meant that I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself and talk to Mr. V, who was a victim in the crime, and face that, because this man lost his life based on people's this I didn't even know. I mean, these games that people play, adults play, and the things that they do. But I had to own that, right? But then I also had to say, Donna, you didn't cause that. You had no control really over that. You could have done things, but you did not cause it. I had to face that, and I had to face Mr. V. So I had to forgive myself there. And then I had to go back to the little girl. I had to go back to little Donna and ask her to forgive me and let her know that it wasn't her fault. Nothing that had ever happened to her was her fault. Because what I realized was I owned every little thing. I carried all that, everything, everything, everything. But I knew somewhere in there that it wasn't. And I held on to that. And not everyone can do that. Not everyone can do that. That's why it's so important to get that help, you know, from those that are in this work, doing this work, to support, to help, to care for those who are being harmed. But I was able to hold on to that light and hold on to that, to that. And I was always searching. And it was that helped me, that God carried me through. And I'm thankful for that, because I could have been dead a long time ago. And I think my mind sometimes, you know, I could have like completely lost all my senses because it was that traumatic. But I'm thankful I didn't. It's not easy though.
No, I really appreciate you sharing it. And, you know every time a survivor tells their story, in some way they go back to it. So we very much appreciate your willingness to open yourself up to questions and share like you are. We have several other questions and a couple of raised hands. So I'm gonna ask this next one that I think a lot of people are probably wondering. Thank you for sharing your story. This comes from Rebecca Feliciano. What do you think providers could have done differently, or what questions they should have asked?
One second. So, I think, you know, it started at school, right? And this is going to tie into the question about what can we do for children of color, Black children specifically, right? I'm not sure if it had anything to do with me being a Black girl when I went to school at 12. I think it had more that time frame. I was in the 70s. Had to do with, oh, it's taboo. We don't talk about it. There's no way in the world that causing harm to a child could be taboo, or causing harm to anyone should be classified as taboo. So we don't talk about it. We sweep it under the rug. We forget. We don't want to deal with it. And then you rush to believe the adult and side against a child who can't do anything for themselves, right? So that's a difficult thing. That's something we have to grapple with. And then for children of color, Black little girls, Black little boys, their experiences are no different than any other child. Children are children. Children are children. They're not things that happen to us as children happen to us just as children, not because we're a child of color or whatever. Abuse like that, it's definitely not prejudice, right? But we're treated differently because we are Black, and we feel that. I think what I get from my experience is this: is that people feel that Black children, they're animalistic anyway. they they have a problem. All the response to a child that's in need for a Black child in need is usually to give them medication, to give them something to shut them down because they're out of control. A child is acting out is not out of control. A child is acting out is having a problem that needs to be addressed, and problem needs to come out and talk in therapy and to like get that child to speak on it, because the child is acting out because they don't know how to voice it. Instead of giving medication to a child of, a Black child, talk to the child, open, let the child, get the child to trust you, to open up to you. That's helpful. And medication is not always the answer. It's usually never the answer. We have to get to talk about it. We stuff the problem. We bury the root causes of things, and so it just continues to build and to grow and to fester. And so it'll manifest into that child now being adult or whatever, now causing harm. So I think that, we hear about the school to prison pipeline and all these other pipelines and stuff. And these are the reasons why, because children of color are not looked at as deserving or should be listened to. Just give them some medication and just shut them up and let them go. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing or anyone here is doing, but I am saying that that's a big factor. Treat children as children, no matter the color, no matter what. A little girl, a little boy, they just want to be a little girl and a little boy. And just listen to them.
So related to what you just shared, Donna, someone asked this question. They thank you for sharing your story, and they ask, have you ever thought about pressing charges against your adoptive parents or the school that neglected you?
So I never thought about the school. I never thought about that. But I did think about my adoptive parents. So when I came out from prison in 2012, they were elderly. One was going through severe dementia. She really wasn't. That was my adoptive mother, was in and out. I had forgiven them long time before I even came out. Long time. I had forgiven them. So I wasn't even looking to get that justification. Sorry about that. That justification. I actually felt compassion because they were elderly. Now they needed help. So I wanted to extend and give myself, to them to help them, now elderly, one's blind, one, dementia. But what I recognized when I tried to do that was nothing had really changed. I had changed. because even my adoptive father, in his not now being blind, I was looking for him to acknowledge and to, you know, and to in some way apologize, right? As we usually do, even in my own healing. But it didn't happen, and that didn't matter. But I realized, I was like, I'm no longer that little girl, and this is not for me. And so I said, well, they'll be okay. Somebody else is going to take care of them. And I removed myself from it. So I didn't even focus on taking them to court, because and now they're both deceased. It would have taken this much time to go through all that process anyway. My healing came through my forgiveness of them, and just knowing that I was now had control over my own life and my own voice and what happened to me. So
Thank you, Donna. We have several questions coming in, and this one was asked a while ago. Let me direct this one to you, and then I'll go to those raised hands who've been patient. As a survivor of child sexual abuse, what advice would you give to advocates who are working with older adults who were abused as children? Resources for child victims who reveal their abuse as adults are scarce, and I would love to hear any advice that you have on this.
yeah. So it's hard, right? Because by the time you're speaking to the adult now, probably the years of abuse and trauma, it's probably a lot that, and even if it was just a one-time act, there's still layer upon layer of trauma based on that, right? Because you don't know how people process it. And obviously, if the person needs help and you're doing something, you know, providing some kind of support or service to them, they're in that place. What I found, you know, I helped build out some programs that dealt with violence when I was in prison, the domestic violence program that we had, and I helped create some and facilitate them. One of the things that was helpful, we had individual groups, you know, one-on-ones, and we also had group settings. What was helpful for me was not to push me to try to talk about that pain, that abuse. It had to come in my own time, because after a while I just shut up because no one was listening anyway, right? Or nobody cared. And so that's what's in the mind, that's what's in here. Like, you don't really care, so that person's probably not trusting. So you have to get that person to a place of trust, and that place of trust is not going to happen if you keep like trying to pull something from them. I do my work now from a harm reduction lens. I meet people where they're at. You come into the office, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to ask for anything. You just sit there. You just want a space to just, we have the TV on. We'll probably have a little music on, whatever. There's computers there, you know. We have a garden in the back. And so that's helpful. But if you don't have that, really the best thing in my experience, because I was like that, was to just give me the time so I could feel comfortable, where I felt like I could trust you with my pain, with my harm, with my hurt, my trauma. And the way to do that oftentimes is just to be still and let the person guide you, and just simply, what do you want to talk about today? They want to talk about the sky being blue, why it's blue, or the war, or whatever is going on in the world or whatever. Let them talk, because that will let them know that they can talk with you. Just listening to them. 99% of the time, a person just wants somebody to listen, to hear them. It's like that, be still, just to be still and let the person know that you're there. You're not trying to get anything from them. You're not trying to pull anything out of them. You're not trying to get them to meet your expectations. It's just simply be. Give them, it's that motivational kind of interviewing thing. So what do you want to talk about today? How are you feeling? That's it. Don't push it too much.
Yeah, let them set the agenda.
Yeah.
We do have someone has a question they're going to ask out loud. Stephanie, I'm going to click your mute button so you can speak.
There we go. Can you hear me? Awesome.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I was on here yesterday and listening to your story, and I so appreciate you your vulnerability. That's got to be a little exhausting, and I just appreciate you opening up to us. It means so much. My question is really, I find that changing the conversation around believing, I work with teenagers and parents of teenagers, and the go-to is to not believe them and to give them further discipline and so changing the conversation, because I can't just be the only one who believes them in the room, other people have to also. So I was just wondering if there's anything that you had to add to how to change that conversation with other adults to help them, because I can give my own experience how believing my own children has allowed them to flourish into better adults than not believing them ever worked for me. So, so I was just wondering if you had anything to add to that conversation to help other adults learn that trusting them is good.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that. I beg to question. I'm often confused by that. Why don't adults believe children? Why do we struggle? I won't say we, but I'm saying we. Why do we struggle with believing children? Why do we struggle with believing the adolescent? Why do we struggle with that? Why is it so difficult? What is it in us where, no, that's a lie. You're not telling the truth. You're making that up. You're telling a story like, oh, we're so quick to do that. Maybe out of whatever story they're telling, in there is the truth. Let them just talk. I promise you, you will find the truth in there somewhere. Because when they know that they're free to do that, they know that you are there for them, as opposed to you trying to make them do what you want them to do. It's the same thing. That's what I just said. Let children be. I had an imaginary friend when I was in Jamaica. I lost that imaginary friend because that imaginary friend when I was in Jamaica was my friend. Like almost a lot of children have that. But what changed for me is when I came here and I started getting that type of abuse, that horrific abuse, and the light became, I was always escaping into a light, something to hold on to. That became my escape, my imaginary friend. And so if children, whatever age, are telling a story, go with that story. See where the story leads. We want to control so much of a person, of a human being. We're all human beings. We want to control so much that we miss the mark. And we ourselves doing this work can cause further harm. So Stephanie, I heard you when you said you're usually the only one, but we have to be kind of like really aware. Why does the parent want us not to believe the child? Remember, it was my parents that were causing me, so-called parents that were causing me harm. I had a father figure taking me into a closet and raping me, sodomizing me almost every day. I had a mother who had clients, patients, just like myself. But she wouldn't give me a key so I could have a key to the bedroom. She wouldn't help me. You'd leave the house and not come back. And she knew what was going on. I knew as an adult. I started seeing, she knew. Be very careful and look at the marks. There are markers that people are showing, they're saying something. If adults keep trying to say, don't listen to the child, why? We can't be so quick to jump on the adult side and like, oh, well, they know what they're talking about. They're the adult, whatever. No, it was the adults that was harming me. And oftentimes that's the case.
Yep. Thank you, Donna. We have quite a few questions now, so I'm going to jump to this next one if that's okay. What do you feel are the most important strategies for building trust with the young people we are supporting when they experienced trauma or violence? And I know you touched on some of that with, you know, listening, but are there other things you would add to that?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's important to, like, you know, in a gentle manner, find out what their interests are. Do they like music? Do they like art, dancing, movies? You know, oftentimes children relate to or equate themselves with a certain movie or something that they find. They're either the superhero or the villain or whatever, you know what I mean? That they're telling you something there. Even in dance, music, art. So if you kind of find their interest, I think the thing is to like come into that process and just kind of be a friend, you know, like you're interested in what they want. What's your favorite food? What do you like to, you know, your favorite color, you know? Ask them, you know, what are the things that they like to do? Like make it safe. Make it simple. We do too much. We use big words. We use so much. We get into that stuff. We get into the book. We don't get into the person. Be simple. I change the way I speak when I go out and I speak to like I'm speaking now. I'm being very clear, and I'm speaking to a group of people that educated, right, and know this work, and you know we're something we stay in the book too much. Get out of the book. Get out of the building. Become a human being. Talk to that little human being, that little person. Find out what their interests are. Come from a safe space. You know, what do they like to do? What's fun for them? You'll get a lot that way. I promise you.
Thank you. We have another few questions. What helped you recover? And can you please name some of the most helpful things you found or that were provided to you to support your recovery?
Well, I want y'all to remember, I grew up in prison. I was there. Got caught up at the age of 19. So by time 20, 21, I was in prison. I came out 27 years later. So I was 47, going on 48. Yeah, everything that happened to me had happened to me by the time I was 19, 20. So remember, I was still a child. I was an adolescent in system standards, right? So I was treated as an adolescent for quite a while. So I had to grow up in a very abnormal environment. And again, I was holding on to that belief that things are different. It was not like this. Like my life couldn't be this. And and when the healing process started, as crazy as it sounds, but in a very dark, even darker place in the prison system it started in solitary confinement. But while I am working on self and facing self, because I couldn't even understand how I even got here and how could a human being's life, because all the craziness that all the stuff that I was subjected to and basically kind of involved, right, without willingly wanting to be involved. There were women screaming, screaming and crying, hanging. I remember a young woman hung herself, died. I was dealing with that in solitary confinement, but trying to hold on, holding on. So the things that worked for me was that place in myself where I knew things had to be better. And I realized that the only way things could be different for me is if I worked on me, if I changed. But it's not even so much that what I tell people is not so much that I changed. What it was I helped myself become who I truly am, because nobody else did that. And so I did that in a very abnormal place. And then I got involved. I was part of a core group of women that created programs that still exist and model across the world today. in the prison setting. We created the first program that responded to HIV and AIDS in prison. It's called ACE. There are many versions of it. The men call it PACE. We created the first, basically only family violence program in this state when Mario Cuomo was governor, and that's how the Office of Domestic Violence was created, because women were going up to Albany, be taken from the prison to go speak with legislatures, because what they realized at a certain time was like, oh my God, there are so many women in here for killing their abuser or snapping or for whatever, whatever that it may be. And that's how that came about, like finding out how many women in the system suffered horrific trauma. Then we brought college back in Bedford Hills. We did that. All the stuff about college and all the programs that exist now started from where we are in Bedford Hills. So that helped me doing something that was not just for myself, but for others. So I had the opportunity in a very abnormal environment to be able to do that, because at that time, for a while, we had a superintendent, some people call it a warden, who allowed us that, right? So I was fortunate enough, as unfortunate as the circumstance, but I was fortunate enough to be in a prison as violent, as crazy as it was, but to have a superintendent that allowed us to create the programs that we needed for our own selves. And one of the things that she said, her name is Elaine Lord, that she would say, and she would fight for us. She said, who better to tell you what they need than the woman themselves? How can you tell somebody what they need? We never listen. People will tell you what they need if we just listen to them. Children will tell us what they need and what's really going on if we just listen, right? We have to really pay more attention to children and to those who say they've been harmed. We really have to hear them. That's why these 2 ears, we have these 2 ears. I hope that answered you a little bit. It's difficult because the only thing that I knew I had was prison. I was there for a very long time, and from a young age.
Yeah, I think in some ways you answered this next question because but I'm going to ask it just in case there's anything you want to add. Someone said, very powerful. Deborah Metat said, very powerful. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. I work with many others who have had similar experiences. What has helped you the most in being able to make these positive changes in your thinking of yourself now?
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
That's it.
Okay.
That was it.
Thank you, Deborah, for that. The other part of that, what did it for me really, even when I was inside, and it happened inside. So when I started hearing the stories of the other women, when I had went in, prison was relatively older. Like they started getting younger with me and moving forward, and that's how the prison population started like increasing exponentially, especially for women, younger as well, and mostly. I started really hearing the stories of the other women, and my heart was hurting because the stuff that I was hearing, the stuff that they were going through, what had happened to them, I was like, oh my God. So I had removed myself. I had become less of myself and my own pain and my own hurt to be present for them, theirs and them, because I couldn't believe how they were treated as little girls or just women. I just couldn't believe it. And I wasn't even like equating it with like my own trauma and the abuse that happened to me. I just couldn't believe how we hurt people. And I just resolved it throughout like, we have to do better than this. Something's got to give. And why are so many of these women in here and have been subjected to so much abuse and violence? It just was mind-boggling. And it just never sat right with me. I knew it wasn't right. But what I felt for them more than I felt for myself. And I just was like, something's got to change. And I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to do, but that helped heal me that's what helped me heal, or helped me in the process. Um, this work is bigger than me. It's just bigger than me. It's bigger than any one of us, right? But it's all of us. And I always look at it in that way, and everything that I do, I present it in that way. Like, it takes all of us. It takes a village. It does. You're on mute, Chris.
Thank you. Yes. Click the wrong button there. Thank you for having such compassion for the other women, and having open it, letting it open your own healing process more. So many times I think that's a common theme for survivors, where we don't see our own worth. We see the pain of other sisters, of other people. I'm calling them sisters because I'm sure, like you said, that was your family when you were incarcerated. You built a family that you had never had. I remember you saying that yesterday, and showing us the photo of you with your women. I so appreciate you sharing that, and I think that resonates for a lot of us, that we learned from each other. We learned from each other how to heal.
Love is a universal language. Love. That's it.
An anonymous attendee asks you, can you talk about some of the work you've been doing through your organization, A Little Piece of Light, especially in regards to juvenile justice and decriminalizing young people?
So thank you for asking me about my organization. So a lot of the work, you know, we're just a year old. I've been individually doing this work, and mostly how I've been doing that is being, people ask me to speak to students. I've spoken at universities, colleges, you name it. I was a scholar in resident at Philander Smith College in Arkansas for a minute, the criminal justice space, talking about this work, in this as well, criminalization of girlhood. From my book, I wrote a book, of course, A Little Piece of Light, my memoir, and create like a curriculum out of that. But it's really just sharing my experience and teaching the history, of criminalization and stuff. So what I do is share my experience within my organization. What we've collaborated with some other community organizations doing this work. We have a restorative justice, intimate partner violence collaborative, but under that umbrella, we work with those who have had any kind of course, domestic violence. Young, old, our focus are women and girls, trans women, because we're not really talking about the harm that trans women are faced every day within the system, outside of the system. I use that. I talk about my experience and the experience of other women to legislatures, whomever will listen, and to really try to get them to understand, my whole thing is how we treat people, And when I talk to young people, one of the first things I tell them, I was you, just like you. I was young once. I wasn't always an old woman, and then I share with them. I just tell them my story. And then what gets them, I don't know, it just gets them all the time. When I said spent 27 years in a maximum security prison, they look at me like I'm lying. They're like, cannot believe it. But that is something that jars them, like, oh, sometimes you got to throw that in there, right? But I'm able to do that because it gets them to think, like, really, what, And so I tell them. And I can't tell you the amount of young women and young men. I have lots of young men that said thank you, for sharing, and they were able to come open up, and I could give them the I guess I've given them the strength to say, well, maybe I can tell, maybe I can talk about this. And it's important for them to be able to see someone, relate to someone. That's helpful too. If you think about that, those of you doing this work, you know, to maybe have someone who can relate to them or who they can relate to, right? They can see themselves, and just to share their story. I wrote a book. People are reading the book. You could share stories out of it, you know, or things out of it if you want to. But I think it's important that we let whomever it may be know that they're not alone, because I think most of us know, I know, that when you're going through any kind of trauma and pain and stuff, you think you're the only one. And that's it. You think you're alone in the world. Like you're some kind of anomaly or monster or alien or whatever. Like it's only happening to you and it's all because of you, and the sun isn't shining because of you. And, you know, because it's such a heavy thing and it's such a distorting thing. Our realities are distorted based on that trauma. And so we can't see ourselves. We can't see our true selves. And so we don't know how to get the world to see who we truly are. So it's important for them to have that identity, that relational identity. So it's often good to be able to show them a story, give them a story, you know, when they're ready. Again, when they're ready. How to make sure we hear them and have them be able to come to that place of trust and openness. I hope that answers you a little bit. And I don't give clear answers. I think solutions, because there are none. This is not a cookie cutter thing. Everyone's different. We process things different. We react to things different. We think about things differently. We're individuals. We're human beings, and that's what makes us a beautiful race of people, right? That we do things differently. And so that's why we need to learn people. We need to see who they really are, hear them, you know, get to know them, so we can know how to deal with them, how to work with them, how to support them, how to care for them, how to love them. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Donna. I see somebody put a question in the chat that I'm going to see if I can read to you now. She says, this is why, and it's a little out of context because you were speaking about this earlier, but this is why when a youth is placed, I take it upon myself to go into a database and read all of their history. I'm an advocate. We must listen and see what the youth says. I once gave the facilities an idea where a timeline could be constructed by each youth. This worked well. The youth on their timelines were able to see where their life had started having challenges and what things were occurring that affected their life changes and eventually ended up in placement. Many saw their life on their personal boards. It was a moment for them to reflect. I guess it's not really so much a question, but I think it's good to share that. And then we do have these questions here. Carolina asks, thank you for sharing, and thank you for that, Daisy. Carolina says, thank you for sharing your story and helping us to see there's hope for children and youth and helping them to see there is light at the end of the tunnel. Do you think culture has a lot to do when families do not listen or believe when a child or a youth speaks up for help? I am Hispanic, and I see a lot of Hispanic families cover up sexual abuse against children. And I'm just going to add that Italians do that, and lots of other cultures do that.
I don't know what cultures does. I'm Jamaican.
Yep.
You know, and you know, American. We all do it, right? We do it. But is it really culture, or is it that thing where we don't talk about? It's not. This is learned behavior. It's learned behavior. So no matter who we are, whatever we identify as, you know, culturally or whatever, ethnically, whatever, this is learned behavior. This has been so ingrained in the fabric of humanity that unfortunately a lot of us really believe it's normal, and it should be normal. Like, it's okay. It's not. It's not. And it's going to take us collectively, right, to really start, like I'm doing it individually and collectively, to like say it's not okay. I don't care if you're Hispanic, you know, whatever Hispanic, you know, whatever you fall under on that, you know, cultural of being Hispanic. But It's not okay. It's not okay when we know we have an uncle that always wants the child to sit on his lap and he's always rubbing on the child or what. It's not okay. No, it's not okay. It's absolutely not okay. And if we don't, and that's what I'm saying, we say, well, it's taboo, we don't talk about it. We all know we all have that uncle or that grandfather or this or that, like, and so we don't talk about it, we just let it go, we sweep it under the rug and let, no. That's why we have the problems that we have in this world, because we really fed into this belief that we just don't talk about it and it's cultural. No, it's not. It's wrong. And sometimes we just have to step up and make people uncomfortable. I love making people uncomfortable because we've been so comfortable for so long that we continue to cause harm. So no, it's not okay. Absolutely not okay. I'll call you out. I have no problem doing that. That's why people, when they read my book, they're like, oh my God, you know, some people are like, oh, that cannot be possible. She must be lying. All that could not have happened to her. Yes, it does. And it happened to so many others as well. And it happens today. And it continues to happen, to happen, to happen. So I made a conscious choice to call it out and say it's wrong because it's wrong. I don't care who you are, what you are. You're wrong.
Thank you, Donna. Cynthia Steffen says, in cases when adults are not complicit in the abuse, I think some adults tend to not want to believe something awful has happened to their kids due to their own fear and repulsion of the possibility.
I'm sorry. You were going to say, Chris? I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I think that's valid. And I think that people as adults need to deal with their fear and their repulsion.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
Get help for themselves so they can be a better resource.
Yeah. But in that, we also, I think if we can, also let the adult know right now they're being selfish because they're so stuck in their own, oh no, that can't be happening, because they're really looking at themselves and not realizing the damage that's being caused to their child. So sometimes you have to separate that. So the adults, you get your
help.
Your help. And let us give the child the help as well. Because right now you're taking away and you're making it about you. Which is okay. That's valid. But the harm is happening to the child who has no control. Right. So you get your help over there and deal with why you can't deal with that.
Yep.
We have to be really clear.
I remember doing prevention education before I worked at NSCASA, and I would go into schools to talk to kids about their right to their bodies and all of that good stuff. And I had one instructor, this was in a middle school setting, like 6th grade. I had one instructor who would just basically act as though I was stealing their time from their important work. And I was wasting the kids' time. And I used to wonder what happened to this adult that's making this person so resistant to my presence in her class. She was the only teacher that ever treated me that way. Everyone else was very gracious for the most part and cooperated with our agency. I actually worked for the Reach Center in Columbia Greene County as an educator. So I know there's someone here from the Reach Center today. And I just was blown away at this teacher's resistance. And I thought, what must have happened to them that they are so uncomfortable with me talking about this?
And that's usually true, right? Because they haven't dealt with their own, but that's how we stuff things. We stuff things, right? And the echoes of that, right? The echoes of that, they come out in some ways. And one of the echoes is why I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't want to deal with it. And so we're adverse, we become, it's antagonistic. We become this, like this with
it might have even been an unconscious buried thing.
Absolutely. And oftentimes it is. There were things that I didn't remember and I thought I was dreaming. I thought some of the stuff that was coming out like during therapy and stuff like that, I was having nightmares. But the nightmares were a reality that had happened when I was a little girl. I didn't know that until going through the process, like, oh, and then I started seeing it in a whole picture. Like I saw it like, oh, wow, this really happened. you know, but
Yeah.
it comes in many ways.
The
It comes in
psyche
many ways.
protects us. It protects us.
Absolutely.
in
Absolutely
ways.
does. Absolutely.
So we have two more questions. Let's see if we can get to these. Micah Katz-Zieger asks you, when it comes to criminalization of young people, BIPOC girls, Black, Indigenous, people of color girls, and trans youth, drugs are often the biggest ways that young people are criminalized. It is also often one of the ways they have found to great risk to treat their symptoms of trauma or just have a friend group. I can relate to this. Can you talk about how your work with harm reduction has influenced your understanding of these issues? You have brought such incredible insights today. Thank you. Do you want me to repeat any of that? Because I stumbled a little. I think you're mute somehow.
So this got me now. Yeah, this is what
Yep.
happens. I'm still learning all this technology, people. I can't catch up. I just have to keep up. So it's more to keep up with. I wasn't
Sure.
born in this age and I went away. I came out like Rip Van Winkle. I say I'm Donna Van Winkle. It's totally beyond me. It's like they're trying to, it's crazy.
You're doing great, Donna. You're doing great.
So I think the question is like, so people will turn to drugs, right?
Yes.
So,
and they use it for self, I mean, they didn't say self-medication, but I'm considering it self-medicating and treating their symptoms of trauma, and also to have a peer support group of some kind.
Yeah, it is. I mean, usually substance use or substance abuse is the result of something. Mental health usually is the result of something, right? Crime, usually the result of something. And again, we have to look at the root causes, right? So the root causes. And drugs, alcohol, all those things, whatever, or anything else that we do to not deal, we'll gravitate to whatever feels right for us.
You just froze. I don't know if you can hear me. Bear with us, folks. I think Donna is just temporarily frozen. Hopefully will come back to us momentarily.
While we're waiting for Donna to return, I just wanted to share a couple of resources in the chat. I posted a link to a report called The Sexual Abuse to Prison Pipeline, The Girl's Story. That's something that if you haven't encountered yet, it's really helpful. It's good data, policy recommendations, so that may be helpful. And I'm also posting the link to the website of Donna's organization, A Little Piece of Light, which she started about a year ago. So you can take a look at that. And in the meantime, please feel free to pop your questions, if you have any, in the Q&A box. And it also looks like there's a hand raised. So just want you to know that we see that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Donna's box anymore, so I'm hoping she's rejoining us.
Yeah, thank you for your patience, folks.
Oh.
Wonderful. Welcome back, Donna.
Yeah, so I'm learning to juggle this thing here. I was like, Forgive me, guys. I was like, okay, the computer's frozen. Don't know why. Have no understanding. So I'm back on my phone. Is everyone okay with this?
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
We have one raised hand that I'm trying to find.
Okay. I know I never did finish the other one about the
Yeah,
drugs, right? So I just wanted
yeah.
to be, yeah, I just wanted to be clear that, you know, we're all going to find a way to medicate to escape the pain, whatever the pain, the hurt is. And so, you know, that takes a process again, you know, get that young person to trust and to, you know, to open up and to talk about it. And sometimes group settings are great, you know, so they have other peers in the setting to let they can identify with, you know, but it's all based on their comfortability if they're ready for it. They might not be ready for it. And so you'd have to gauge that, you know, as the provider, you'd have to gauge that and to see where they're at.
Thank you. Actually, I'm not seeing any raised hand. So if that person wants to raise their hand again, that would be fine. A question just disappeared that I was about to ask, but I'm going to ask you this one. Can you share any specific legislation you've worked on or are working on? And are there any noteworthy politicians who you work with? And then their third question is, what kind of changes would you like to see in the criminal injustice system? So there's three questions there. Specific legislation, noteworthy politicians, and changes.
Yeah, thank you for that. That person must be involved. They said the words, they were keywords that were used. I like it. So I've been I co-lead, my organization co-leads a legislation called Less is More, which would stop the reincarceration of an individual who has not committed a crime. People are sent back to prison for technical violations, which are not crimes in and of themselves, usually because they had a dirty urine or they didn't get a job, you know, can't find, maintain, update, whatever, a job, which is even more difficult for a person who has any kind of criminal justice involvement, housing, family issues. There's so many things that a person could be reincarcerated for, and it's not a crime. So that legislation would address that and give the incentive for those who don't face the so-called, you know, technical violations to earn some good time, you know, to incentivize it, because parole has become such an albatross, right? An albatross where it weighs you down, like you can't really become this productive citizen that you want to become. You want to have a job, you want to contribute to society, you want to do some stuff, but you're just not given the opportunity, you know. And that's most of the case, right? We always see the stories that depict those of us who've been incarcerated as monsters and the worst of anything. But you would never know that I've been incarcerated unless I told you. And I'm working, I have an organization now. I make sure, you know, other people are okay. I take care of communities and people. You know, that's what I'm doing. I'm working on legislations to change things, to make things better for all of us. You know, we're going to have crime. We're going to continue to have crime if things are not addressed, if we don't look at the root causes. So some of the other stuff is closing Rikers Island. Rikers Island continues to be one of the largest penal colonies for people just awaiting trial, you know, waiting the judicial process, and the culture there is horrible. I was there for 13 months, and the way in which I was treated back in '85 was horrible, you know, and we see what's going on today, and it's not so much a place that makes it that way. It's a culture, right, that we've created to continue the practice of that. And so we just need to change that whole entire thing. Um, Working on some federal stuff, working on, you know, focus on getting some women out, because we never really talk about women who've become the fastest growing population or in the overall federal and state systems in the last 30 years, to get some out who've been there for a long time or been, you know, who have such a crazy amount of time, and it's not doing any taxpayers any good. Yes, justice. I see the justice for Khalif Browder. I think that popped up there, right? But you know, we have a way of this country, right? Has a way of criminalizing everything and everyone, and being punitive beyond extra. I mean, we don't look at the root causes. We don't look at our communities that are don't have the resources, that are so impoverished. They don't even have, a lot of Black and brown families don't have their own doctors. They didn't grow up with a doctor, so they know their family history, what their illnesses are, what they're faced with, all these things. And we need to do better. And so those are some of the things that I work on. We had created a coalition for voters' education and registration to teach people the importance of using their voice and that voting power, right? And that's, if it didn't mean so much, they wouldn't be fighting so hard for taking it away from us. And so we're teaching them why, and to exercise that right. It's their right. We're focused on quite a bit of things. That's just some of the stuff. But those are things that are really, really front and center to my mind. And also we were instrumental, based on my participation inside, drafting the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act to DVSJA. And after 10 plus years, we finally got it passed. And so that also affects men, whoever has had significant trauma and abuse in their lives, to get their cases, basically re-adjudicated and time served. Because one of the things we keep telling people is people that have been so harmed and so traumatized never had the opportunity, never got the counseling, the therapy, the support that they need, and to just throw them in prison and say, okay, you're gone for the rest of your life, or almost, most of your life. That's not a good response. At some point in time, that person's going to get out. So what have we done for them? Who are they today? How are they? Not everybody can make that, can do that, can do the time like that. It's really difficult. So, that's one of our focus, to make sure that the people that will benefit from the DVSJA have that support when they come out.
Thank you so much, Donna. We have another question here. I do want to acknowledge this, what you just said, though, about not everybody can do the time. Not everybody comes out better than they went in. Like, you came out in a whole new way than you went in. You found your core self while you were there, like by connecting, I think, through, like you said, family that you created there. But not everyone has that fortune. And yeah, I just really feel, whenever I think about your book, I'm just amazed at the power of it. I really recommend it for those of you who weren't here yesterday and haven't had a chance to check out Donna's book. It is really revelatory. This anonymous attendee has a question for you. Now, I want to move to that one because I know we're running short on time, but I could talk with you for hours. And I know I'm not the only one here who feels that way. There's been so many comments in the chat thanking you for this. Does your work ever cross over with the child welfare system? And if so, how and what would you want to see change there?
So I have had, before I started the organization, some of the work I was doing before, had some women who've had certain, child-related issues. And I've had to, I had to kind of support both sides, right? Be there, understand the child and also the parent. It's not easy, but it's possible. And one of my things is, kind of being that neutral kind of, not arbiter, but that neutral kind of person to understand both, being a child myself and a mother, was to emphasize the importance of the relationship, child and parent relationship, child and mother relationship, right? And what I learned when I was in Bedford, for women that had child-related crimes, they were only repeating what had been done to them. And so I stress that when those things, when they had come up, that, I get people to understand that, I understand the person has done something wrong, or there's an issue here. We don't know if the person has done something wrong, but the way to address it, I think, should be where that mother or person, it's usually the mother, in my case, the people I help, gets the support as well, and gets some kind of counseling therapy to find out what's going on, what has happened in her life, if what's happened is really true, because sometimes allegations are made not by the child but by others. That's not true, because people do that as well. And so we have to be careful, but we have to know the whole story, and the only way to know the whole story is to like really talk to the person and try to support that person. And it might be something really horrendous, but you have to find out what happened. And the way and why we have to do that is so that we know, we could see the signs, we know what to look for, and we could help prevent it from happening again. The root causes are always the most important things. Why people do things, what's happened to them, if they've done it. We need to know the person, we need to know their story. We have to see the person as a human being and look at them and not the act. We have to look at them and see them.
Well, thank you, Donna. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. I don't see any raised hands. Ms. Casatine, do you see anything I'm missing?
No?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you,
Mhm.
Sana. Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Trudy, for all your wonderful ASL interpretation. Thank you to our captioner, Beverly, and thank you to you, Donna Hylton. It has been
Thank
such an incredible honor to work with you these 2 days, and I really hope that we can continue to uplift your work, highlight your successes, and showcase you again in the future.
Thank you so much.
If there's any last thing you wanted to share with us before we sign off,
Yes.
I know that there'll be all kinds of comments of thanks coming in the chat, so we'll allow that to stay open for people.
Yeah. I always want to leave people with, some optimism and inspiring stuff. So I just want everyone to know, I thank you for doing this work and being who you are in this work and the roles that you play. And just know that it's very important. It's very important. There's so many children that need you. There's so many people that need you and your support. Oftentimes, what people are simply looking for, no matter age, is love and acceptance. That's what I was looking for. I just wanted someone to show me some love, some real, true love. Love doesn't hurt, doesn't cause harm. Love in its rare, natural form is just simple and honest and allows people to be who they are, express themselves, and no matter how they express themselves. And that's nurturing. And just know that people are just need that. They might not be getting that, at home or wherever they are. And so they look to you for that. You don't have to be a mother figure or father figure or anything like that, but just a human being that is listening and just being there being there with them. And that means for them. And so I thank you for doing that. And I just look to you all to continue to do that, and to see a person not by the color of their skin, not by the identity they choose to identify as, not by their religion, not by the culture, the food they like or don't like, how they pray, don't pray, all those things. Just see them as a human being. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a peaceful and safe weekend ahead of you. Some time for fun.
So relax.
People are